Frigidaire. It means the first electric refrigerator, the first compact electric range. Now, there's the Frigidaire Gallery Range with Symmetry double ovens. It's designed to cook multiple dishes at multiple temperatures, so you can prepare the entire meal at the same time. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
Hi, I'm John Mallos. Welcome to this edition, a special edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. It's on the air, off the presses, but today we honor a veteran who is a former managing editor of the Fresno Bee for many years. You may recognize the name and the face. He is our guest today. We'll talk about the War Memorial in D.C., a couple of books that he's written, actually more than a couple. He's written 3 books now, and one is out, a new one. We're going to be back here with our program. You know what? We got to do it again. I'm sorry.
Frigidaire. It means the first electric refrigerator, the first compact electric range. Now, there's the Frigidaire Gallery Range with Symmetry double ovens. It's designed to cook multiple dishes at multiple temperatures, so you can prepare the entire meal at the same time. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
Hi, I'm John Mallos. Welcome to this special edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. We are honoring our veterans here on this day, and one in particular, a former managing editor of the Fresno Bee for many years. It's on the air, off the presses with our special guest. We're back in just a moment.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
Glad to have you along on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. Connect with me on the showroom floor, of course, and live on Comcast, channel 187, 43.6, and 13.1 now. And also the replays happen later in the day, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on YouTube, and then Biz TV at 8 o'clock, and we're all over the place on YouTube on this particular edition of Connect with Me and many others. We've done more than 600 shows now the last 3 years, so you can check us out. Also today, I do want to mention that we have a brand new sponsor here on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. He is Dr. Thomas Casagrande. He is the owner of 2020 Optometrics. He's got more than 2,000 frames. We're glad to have him as a sponsor. He's been in business for more than 2 decades. He's in the same parking lot as More Furniture over there and the Fresno Suit Outlet. He's been there. Go check him out if you have eye problems or need new glasses. He has so many frames to choose from. It's incredible. We appreciate his sponsorship. We're on the air, off the presses today, but we're honoring veterans as well. And one World War II veteran in particular who has written 3 books now. One is out, and he's touting that one as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about Veterans Day and the War Memorial. I want to take you to the videotape, my friend, because I want to introduce you to a living legend here in the Central Valley. His name is George F. Gruner, the former executive editor and managing editor of the Fresno Bee, 33 years to be exact. There he is there in his home. Prior to that, he worked at the Oakland Tribune and as a copy editor on the civilian staff of the European edition of the Stars and Stripes, the Armed Services newspaper. In fact, back in 1989, the McClatchy Newspaper Company established the Gruner Awards, a once-a-year award awarded in April. The Bee provides a grant to make the awards possible. The Gruner Awards are given to those who are recognized in having done an outstanding job in newspaper journalism across our region, the Central Valley. Mr. Gruner was also a central figure in a freedom of the press issue back in 1976, and as part of the Fresno Four, was jailed for refusing to give up a source. We'll talk to him about that. Since retiring, he's written 3 books, though. One was on the history of the battleship USS California, another on the coastal passenger liner Yale and Harvard, and now a 3rd book is out of print, or not out of print, it's off the presses right now, and he's touting that one. There he is in his home. We'll talk about that. Live in our studio right now is George F. Gruner, the man. We are honored that he is here today. He is a living legend, my friends, part of the Fresno Four. We'll talk to him about that and much more. We'll talk about the War Memorial in Washington, D.C., and his great service to this country. He served also in World War II. He is a veteran. And Veterans Day, of course, November 11th, and we honor those who served before us and also those who are serving now, and those who gave the great sacrifice. We're back with our program here on Connect with Me on Me TV Fresno with George F. Gruner in just a moment. At 2020 Optometric, your vision is their focus. Whether you're 5 or 65, Dr. Thomas Casagrande will get to know you, your lifestyle, and vision needs to ensure that your contacts or eyeglasses are a perfect fit and the right prescription every time. With the Valley's largest selection of eyewear, 2020 has over 2,000 frames, including top designer brands like Coach, Tiffany, Prada, Ray-Ban, Oakley, and more. Eye exams start as low as $89, so call or stop by to schedule your appointment today. Yep, once again, our thanks to Dr. Thomas Casagrande. He's our new sponsor here on Connect with Me every Monday on the show on Me TV Fresno, so go out there and check him out over there at near Shaw and Blackstone. Anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome in now George F. Gruner. I'm so honored to meet you, sir, for the first time, and thank you for being here.
I'm pleased to be here. It is always an experience to go out and remind people of the fact that there's still a few of us veterans of World War II kicking around, but mainly I'm now in the principal role of making more people aware of what took place in Fresno back in those World War II days.
Right. Well, you served your country not only in the military, but served your country well as a renowned journalist. It's amazing. You spent 46 years in the media, 33 of those at the Fresno Bee. I do want to get into your books in just a moment, but why did you choose the profession?
Well, I don't know.
Of journalism.
Journalism, I got started in it in high school, actually. I worked on the school paper, and I was editor of my high school paper, and it just seemed to be more fun than work. So actually, when it actually was right after Pearl Harbor that I was going to graduate from high school in January of '42.
Which high school?
It was Castlemont High School in Oakland, East Oakland, and I went down to the Oakland Tribune, which was quite a newspaper in those days, and applied for a job as a copy boy. Mm-hmm. And I started there as a copy boy at $16 a week, which was good money then for a kid coming out of high school. And as it turned out, the older staff members were going off to service, and so I spent about a year graduating from a copy boy to a cub reporter, and having pretty good significant assignments because of that. And before I knew it, why I had spent about a year there, and I was 18 in February of 1943. I registered for the draft, but paying no attention to the military because I was having such a good time being a newspaper man that before I knew it, why I got my letter from the president, and bingo, I was in the Army.
Wow. What's the one thing that you learned in those early days as a young boy working at the Oakland Tribune that stuck with you not only through your years at the Fresno Bee, but even today?
Well, I think one of the principal things that I learned was that words have varied meanings, and the sense of words are as important as the definition. Meaning, like if let's say you're interviewing a politician, and if he's a politician you like, and he declined to answer a question, he didn't answer a question, you would say he refused to answer a question. If you liked him, you'd say he declined to answer a question. So the sense of the words, the soft words, the sense that words are received, and that's of course a blatant example, but words can be used in many ways. And I'm still, in my later years, I became an editor rather than a writer, so I was always dealing with younger people and teaching them the meaning and the sense of words. I had a couple of sub-editors in my early days at the Tribune who would take my copy aside after the crush of getting out the daily paper, and we would he would say, what's the sense of this word? And I would say, well, it means, no. He says, I'm not asking you to define it. I want you to tell me the sense of it, how you use it, and so on. So that kind of on-the-job training has stuck with me through these years.
So if a reporter is going to be unbiased in his article, in interviewing a politician, and if the politician does not want to answer that question, how should you write that in your article, not so you don't seem biased one way or the other? Because like you said, if you say he refused, you didn't like him, you say he declined, the inclination is, maybe you kind of like this guy.
That's right, what's the show? So
what's the correct term?
Well, what you would do would be to use a neutral term, try to find a neutral term. I don't think that most reporters, and in the many years at the Bee, we heard on various times from various parties that we were biased and so on. But I think that most reporters don't give much thought to the political positions of the newspaper or the management. They're basically trying to tell the story, and you want them to tell the story as fairly as they can. If you only talk to one side, why, you're not going to have a fair story, because you're not getting the other half of the story as the opposition to whatever you're talking about comes forward. So I think editors' jobs, mainly through the years, and I think it's true today in newspapering still, because newspapers basically have more time to look at the copy that they're dealing with, whereas other forms of delivery are almost instantaneous. So you don't have a lot of time to think about what you're saying and on rephrasing it perhaps in what you're saying. And that also applies to books. I can go through these books now, and each time I read them, I find sections or sentences or paragraphs that I wish I'd written differently.
Yeah, but at the time,
this is what came out.
Yeah,
maybe
out.
Before it was printed, I revised it 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
But now there's still 5 or 10 or 12 times.
Yeah, that's okay. But see, each and every day is a different day, and so different thoughts come out of your brain.
That's right. And your experiences change over time. My attitudes are certainly different than they were when I was 21.
Yeah.
But some of them aren't.
All right, we're talking with George F. Gruner, the one and only. We're honored that he is here today. He's a former veteran, 33 years with the Fresno Bee. By the way, our program today is sponsored by Thomas Casagrande. He is a doctor. He specializes in eye care over there at Shaw and Blackstone. He's got 20/20 optometrics and more than 2,000 frames. He's our sponsor today. We're back with our program and our special guest in just a moment.
It's almost time.
Now we'll find out once and for all about Clark Kent, Superman.
Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a TV show.
Yes, but who is he? What's his name?
He's Superman.
Golly, Clark, won't that be wonderful seeing Superman?
Fighting a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and television the MeTV way.
No one can do the things that Superman does.
The adventures of Superman.
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
This is why I like today's program, because our guest today, he and I have something in common. We both worked in the media. I've been in the media for, well, I don't know, since the mid-'70s, I guess. I started as a very tender age of, what, 16, 17. So, and then you started at the age of 16, you said, right?
I was 16, and I was 17, and a couple of months later, and I went back for my high school graduation a month after I went to work as a copy boy. And
it is a fascinating business, and I look back and I wonder how I've been able to survive so many years in this industry where so many younger people are being hired.
Yeah.
And things are shrinking. I want to get into that a little more, but I do want to talk about your books. You've written 3 books.
Yeah.
The first 2, I named them monologue.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us what the first 2 books were again.
Well, the first book, when I retired from the Bee, I served in the Army, but there was an employee there, Doug Hansen, who was a noted artist here in town. He was working on the staff, and his father had served in the Navy, and he and I talked a lot about Navy stuff. I'm a big gun nut.
Oh, okay.
I'm a big gun, and I mean guns this size, 14-inch guns, battleships and things like that. I'm particularly interested in the battleship era of the U.S. Navy, and he knew that when I was retiring, he knew that I had that interest. So he painted, well.
Let me hold this book up for you here. I'll hold it up to the camera.
That battleship on the cover.
Okay. We'll show the cover there.
You turn it around, open it a little more, and you get a little more of the ship.
Okay.
But the battleship is actually Doug Hansen's painting. When I retired, Doug Hansen
kind of washes out there a little bit.
Well, that's not the painting. The cover is the painting.
The cover is the painting.
He painted an oil painting of the battleship California as it appeared in 1937, I believe that was.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me that oil painting. And I said, this looks like a book cover.
Yeah.
And so I went looking for books on the battleship California, which is very, not only is it named after this state, but it was built at Mare Island.
So what's the book about?
It's about the battleship California and its life.
I see.
2 lives of the battleship California, because in its first life, it was the flagship of the Pacific Fleet, flagship of the battle force, built in California, only battleship built from the ground up on the West Coast. The rest of them were all built back east. And it was sunk at Pearl Harbor and raised, brought back to Bremerton, scraped down to the second deck below the main deck, and rebuilt as a modern battleship, except they kept the guns, the 14-inch guns, and they kept the propulsion, which was electric. And that made it a slow battleship. During World War II, we had 2 classes of battleships. The fast battleships were always referred that way, most of them in the Iowa class, and the slow battleships, including the California. Well, the slow battleships couldn't keep up with the carriers, so the slow battleships were used primarily for invasion bombardment, meaning they fired their big guns the way that they were designed to be used, whereas the fast battleships primarily served as protection, anti-aircraft protection for the carriers. So that is the 2 classes of ships, and the 2 lives of the California was, one, it was the top-ranked ship in the fleet. In its second life, it was one of the many ships that were required in all of the invasions we made in the Pacific.
Yeah,
so it had quite a long life.
The slow ships specialized in guns.
Bombardment, heavy bombardment,
yeah.
Of invasion beaches.
And the fast ones specialized in aircraft. Okay.
Smaller guns.
And so this is about the USS California, and this book came out when?
Well, golly.
Several years ago, right?
Several years ago, yeah. I'm sponsored by the Maritime Museum in San Francisco. When I made the point that here we had this ship that was really a noteworthy ship, but had never been written about. And now it's at least the history is preserved in the great libraries, not only everyday libraries up and down the state, but it's in the Bancroft Library at the University of California. It's in the Huntington Library down in Southern California. So it's in these principal historical libraries.
Can you still buy this book somewhere?
Unfortunately, you can still buy this book, but the cost of it has gone up. It's out of print, and it's now listed as a classic. And you can buy it from Amazon if you have $400.
Is it on in paperback or hardback?
No, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to convince the Maritime Museum to bring it out in a paperback. It costs $65 in its initial form because it was such a beautiful job. But even then, it was too expensive for the average.
And how much
buyer.
How much time and research?
I took 4 years on that book. I put in 4 years, including a solid month. My wife let me leave Fresno and go to Washington to the National Archives, and I spent 30 days every day in the National Archives, except Sunday, when the archives were closed. But the Library of Congress was open on Sundays, so I did research in the Library of Congress on Sundays. But from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for a solid month on all the other days of the week, I was researching this book because the files, the National Archives is one of the great institutions of the federal government. I called back there when I initially started work on it. I asked the archives people, I said, what have you got on the Battleship California? And they said, well, when was it commissioned? I said, 1919. And they said, well, okay, when was it decommissioned? 1946. Well, we have daily logs from 1919 to 1946.
So you went over those daily logs?
I went through those logs, and I went through tons and tons of other papers, too, because as the flagship, it had admirals aboard. And in those days, it had 4-star admirals commanding the fleet. And the California was the flagship of that particular force at that time. And in fact, it was built as a flagship. It had most ships, big ships, have a big room, a wardroom for the officers. Well, the wardroom on the California, because it was specifically designed during the construction period as a fleet flagship, they put, in effect, 2 wardrooms in one from side to side from of that particular ship. But and it's had almost all of the chiefs of naval operations and so on served on the California at some time, because this was back in the days of what we call the Black Shoe Navy.
Right.
The Black Shoe Navy was the surface guys. The Brown Shoe Navy was the flyers, and they wore brown shoes and kind of green uniforms, whereas the regular guys, the surface guys, wore black shoes with their regular Navy uniforms that we come to know.
Right, and I'm looking at this copyright edition here, 1996. 1996, and a signed copy here by George F. Gruner. Yeah. Hey, we're going to be back with our program here on Connect with Me. We're talking with Mr. Gruner about his books that he has written, and we'll talk about the latest one coming up in a moment here. Today's program sponsored by Dr. Thomas Casagrande, the owner of 2020 Optometrics. We're back with our program in a moment.
Ladies' Night was started in his honor. Bar stools pulled themselves out for him. The only thing Chuck Norris is afraid of is her. Cheers is the most memorable bar in the world. You may not always watch comedy, but when you do, watch Cheers.
Me TV Fresno, channel 43.6 and Xfinity 187.
Back here on the program today, our sponsorship is by Dr. Thomas Casagrande, owner of 2020 Optometrics. George F. Gruner is our guest, and the other book, the second book that you wrote, not the most recent one, but it's about the coastal passenger liners, the Yale and the Harvard?
That's correct.
Okay, a little bit about that one.
Okay, that particular book was, I actually saw the Yale back in the days when I was a kid growing up in the Bay Area. We used to go over to San Francisco and we'd see people sailing away from San Francisco with confetti and bands and all that, and they weren't cruise ships, they were just overnight passenger boats going from San Francisco to LA and San Diego. And I was interested in those books in later years after I finished the Battleship book, and I convinced the Maritime Museum that they ought to publish a book about them. The Yale and the Harvard actually were distinctive ships in that they were the second and third turbine-powered ships in the United States.
Really?
You know, the turbine was developed in England, and a few of the ships were built over there first, but the first ships built here were the Yale and the Harvard, which were built on the East Coast, and they were named the Yale and the Harvard because they operated between New York and Boston, and they were overnight boats on that particular service. They were competing with the Fall River line, which was the main way of getting from New York to Boston in those days. Anyway, the owner of the Fall River line was one of the power magnates in the East, and he found this competition from the Yale and the Harvard more than he liked, so he bought the line and shipped the Yale and the Harvard to the West Coast, which meant they had to come around the Horn in those days for the Panama Canal. And in the 20s and 30s, well, even before that, they operated between San Francisco, LA, San Diego. When World War I came along, the Navy took over the Yale and the Harvard, and they became transports, and the Navy took them to Europe, to England, and they became shuttle boats in the English Channel for troops between England and France in the front lines. After World War I, they were brought back to the West Coast. The Harvard eventually went aground off Point Arguello and crashed, and everybody aboard was rescued. It turned out to be a mild day, but you know, if you look at the California coastline, you know that there's a sharp turn to the right, I guess, depending on how you're looking at a map, to get through the Santa Barbara Channel. Well, on this occasion, the Harvard made the turn too soon, and they ended up on Point Arguello, and the ship was a total loss. But the Yale continued in service, and it actually was taken back by the Navy in World War II and was shipped up to the Aleutian Islands, where it was used more or less as a
So the
barrack
Harvard
ship.
was totally destroyed?
It was totally destroyed on Point Arguello, right.
Okay.
And there are, in that book, which took about a year to compile, there are pictures of her breaking up on the coastline there, and so I put in 4 years, as I said, on the Battleship, because it had a much longer life and there was so much more documentation to find on it, and whereas I put in about a year and a half on the Harvard and the Yale, and then I put in about 2 years on Into
Pass
the
your
Night.
newest book along here to me, and I'll hold that up. This is the one that just came out. When was this? This one in the
This one is
copyright,
actually
and-
about 2 years ago now.
Okay. So this would have been 2012?
12, yeah.
Okay,
That's why.
so that's the copyright on this one. And it's called Into the Night. It's about Hammerfield, Camp Pinedale, and the Fresno Fairgrounds.
Yeah.
What do you talk about in this book?
Well, actually, I talk about those three bases now, but I started out primarily concerned about Hammerfield because it was the major installation here. And in my retirement, I'd often wondered about Hammerfield. I'd heard of Hammerfield briefly. But I would talk to I came to Fresno in 1955, and I talked to people like myself who had come to Fresno in post-war years, and said, "What do you know about Hammer Field?" They said, "Never heard of it, never heard of it." And I said, "Well, if I told you it was a Fresno Air Terminal, that's Hammer Field." "Oh, really?" And they say, "Oh, was that a base?" I said, "Yeah, that was a military base." But most people think it was built subsequent to Pearl Harbor, but actually it was built in 41, and
during the war,
before the war. Remember, December 7th, 41.
Well,
yeah, it was
we got
in the European War.
Yeah, the
Right.
European, because we got involved
the Japanese,
late.
we got in. We didn't
got
get
in
in
late.
until
We were
41.
latecomers,
But
yeah.
when we think about World War II, we think of December 7th as our start date.
We relate it to us
yes.
instead of the European War.
But
yeah.
actually, it had a tie to the European War, because President Roosevelt at that time in 1940 actually began to see what was happening to England with the German Air Force, which was dominant in those early years, and he decided, he knew that we had to rebuild, and we had a very ancient Air Force at the Army. It was Army Air Corps actually, and so the president said, "Well, I want to develop a force with of 10,000 men and 10,000 planes," and somebody told him, "Well, you got to have a place to put 10,000 planes." So he said, "Well, yeah, we need to build a lot of bases too." So the government actually in 1940 started building a lot of military bases, not just major ones like Hammer Field, bomber bases, but also little bases like Eagle Field and some of the other valley locations where they could begin to train people initially how to fly, and then from that initial training into a secondary bases where they could learn to fly multi-engine planes and dual compartment planes. And then the third level, which became Hammer Field, where they could actually get into the combat planes and learn to fly them in formation and on
so
various
they used
flights.
Hammer Field for training personnel how to fly combat missions?
That's exactly what they were doing, training how to fly combat missions
At Hammer Field.
At Hammer Field, after they had learned to fly in an AT-6 or
Right.
The Texans or the little yellow high-wing planes that the Ryan planes and so on.
But this is before we became involved in World War II?
That's right, before we became involved.
1941.
1941. This base opened before Pearl Harbor.
So not only were we storing planes at Hammer Field, we were teaching our pilots.
Well, we weren't storing them there, but they were, by the time the field opened, we were actually using them for tactical training.
How many planes did they have there initially?
Well, it depended. We had usually at one time there would be a group which would consist of maybe 4, 5, 6 squadrons. Mm-hmm. And it depended on the type of plane. Initially, Hammer Field was used to train 2-engine bombers. The B-25s, the B-26s, the Mitchells, the Marauders, 4 or 5 different model, what they called, in those days, they called assault bombers. When later on, one of the principal uses was to train B-24 squadrons, the big bombers. Mm-hmm. And that was in the middle period. And at the end, Hammer Field became the only training base in the United States for the night assault, night raiders that we developed to attack oncoming enemy bombers. And that was the Black Widow. Now, the Black Widow was a twin-engine fighter, but it was twice as big as a P-38. And it had a crew of 3 instead of just a single pilot. And the Into the Night theme comes from my dual use of words here again. we trained people to go up into the night to meet the enemy bombers coming head on. And we started off with a plane called the P-70, which was called a Night Raider or something of that sort. But it basically was the A-20 attack bomber of early World War II. And it was really not properly equipped. It couldn't climb fast enough. So the Air Force asked the aircraft designers to come up with a plane that had all the characteristics they needed and that had involved radar. By that time, radar was developed. So Northrop came up with the P-61 Black Widow, and it became the primary night fighter both in Europe and in the Pacific.
I see. All right. The book is called, yeah, go ahead.
Into the Night. The reason I use Into the Night was partly because of that, but also partly, as I say in the foreword, that the base itself disappeared into the night after the war because it became forgotten largely.
Right.
And the same applied to it, Camp Pinedale, which became the principal Signal Corps training base for the Western United States, Air Force training, Signal Corps training, and of course the fairgrounds. It was a basic training for people going into the Air Force. So they were all Air Force related.
All right. So Camp Pinedale and Fresno Fairgrounds, they both had a role in World War II.
Oh yeah.
Major
Definitely.
role. So so Fresno Fairgrounds, that was more of a training ground for these
for basic training. They learned that if you went into the Air Corps, if you went into the service and said, I want to go in the Air Corps, and they said, okay, we're going to assign you to the Air Corps or the Air Force, as they changed it to
send you
later.
over here to the fairgrounds.
They'd send you to the fairgrounds to learn how to march. So, you know, you start, when they say forward march, it's on your left foot, and they have basic weapons and so forth, and basic facilities, all of the basic training before they would assign you to an actual Air Force installation.
And Camp Pinedale was what?
Camp Pinedale, as was the fairgrounds, was initially the Japanese internment camps.
Okay.
And they were built, plywood shacks, tar paper shacks, built to house. They were not the ultimate permanent areas where those people were kept for a long time. They were the assembly camps, and there were 4 of them here in the valley.
Temporary.
Temporary. They gathered up these people who, in almost every case, were
American
citizens who had no reason to be taken into camp like that, but the hysteria was such at the time that the military did it, and the governor and the commanding general of the 4th Army here in California said, we got to gather them up because for all we know, the Japanese fleet's coming over the horizon right at us.
All right. The book is called Into the Night by George F. Gruner. He's our guest today. This is the book, and you can get this one. It is in print right now. It's out in full hardcover, and the cost is what, George, real quick?
About $35. You can get this at the Military Museum downtown, or at the Clovis Museum, Clovis Veterans Memorial Building, and also in the
Legion of Valor.
Clovis in the Legion of Valor's downtown.
Okay.
The Clovis Veterans Memorial District offices.
Right. But can you buy this at the Legion of Valor as well?
You can buy it downtown, yes.
Okay.
And you can buy it there. You can also buy it at the Book Barn in Clovis.
All right. We're going to be back with our guest here. Our program today is sponsored by Dr. Thomas Casagrande, owner of 2020 Optometrics over at Fresno and Blackstone. Back in just a moment.
Frigidaire. We introduced the first home freezer, the first pulsator agitator washer, and now we introduce the Frigidaire Orbit Clean dishwasher, designed with a unique wash arm that gives you 4 times more water coverage for a consistently better clean. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
talking about this fascinating book, which I have not read yet. It's called Into the Night. It came out a couple of years ago, but you know, Veterans Day, November 11th, and George F. Gruner is a former veteran, former editor of the Fresno Bee, of course, 33 years. He retired back in 1988. I want to roll some videotape that we took here with our staff. It's called Hats, and the many hats of George F. Gruner inside his home here. You can describe, once the video comes up, mostly military hats here. The USS California, I see there, right?
That's right. Those hats, I wear those hats whenever I am out trying to increase the sales of the book, all of which benefit either the Memorial District, the museum in Clovis, or the Legion of Valor. I assigned the copyright over so that I'm not taking anything out of the books. The hats, when I'm pushing the California book, why I wear the California, USS California BB-44 hat, because I'm an honorary life member of the Battleship California Veterans Association, although I never served on the ship. The Clovis hat in the back is the hat for the Clovis Veterans Memorial District. The hat in the middle there is my hat. I'm a World War II veteran. I have my combat ribbons, service ribbons along the side there, and with 3 battle stars. I was involved in 3 of the battles in Europe. And the one on the far right there is the WSATC, is the Western Signal Corps Unit Training Center hat, and otherwise known as Camp Pinedale.
Your service to this country during the war, you fought in how many battles? 3,
well,
you
I
said?
served in 3 of the major battles in Europe. The way the battle stars are awarded: Rhineland, Ardennes, and Central Europe. And the Ardennes campaign, of course, was the Battle of the Bulge.
Yep.
And I was in that, and I served in the headquarters battery of an anti-aircraft unit. And I connected up with this 440th anti-aircraft in the middle stages of the European War. I was not over there for the initial period, but when I got over there in 44, why we'd already had the invasion and landed, and I joined up at about the time when the battle lines were pretty much along the German border.
Yeah, and you landed on the beaches of Normandy, but well after the invasion, of course.
That's right, that's right.
What kind of condition did you find the beaches? Was it all cleaned up by the time you got there? Or
it was cleaned up in the sense that there was not all the detritus that you have of a battlefield there. They had all that cleaned up. But basically, the way in was the same way. We crossed the channel in an old pre-war cargo liner, and we landed at Omaha Beach. And part of Omaha Beach, the actual landing setup had been destroyed in a storm very early on in the first days of the invasion.
Well, what made it so difficult for our soldiers? Was it the fact that the German soldiers were so high up on the cliffs and they could look down on our guys?
That's, yeah, getting back to talking about the actual invasion, they had all of those beaches in what we would say, using a military term, in defilade, which means they had the guns focused along the beach, so that they could crisscross the fire along the beach, and actually the shallow areas were loaded with great big steel works that were designed to tear the bottoms out of ships before they could get in.
Wow.
And a lot of our ships that came in there had to take landing ship tanks and things of that nature. The equipment was designed so that the exhaust pipes were sticking up out of the water. Well, some of those tanks, and there's a new movie out that's touting the tank corps. The tank guys had to land in 4 feet of water. you try to drive in a foot of water in a rainstorm, you know what happens. Well, these tanks had all of their air connections raised up on pipes to stick out of the water. And of course the invasion, and in addition to that, the cliffs along there, Point du Hoc especially is noteworthy in most histories of the invasion for the giant casemate guns. We talk about, I'm a big gun nut again here. Most of those big guns and the coastal artillery was already set up there to fire out to hit the ships coming in, and also to having smaller guns that rained along the landing beaches themselves.
I do want to mention to our viewers that George F. Gruner saw action in France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany during World War II. And so we thank you for your service to your country and our country. And you risked your life like many others did, and to those that gave the ultimate sacrifice, of course. I do want to talk a little bit about your journalism career. And I did mention here, I do want to roll another piece of videotape, though, as we do that. It's called Collectibles. But you served so many years writing about the Central Valley, after your war service. And, here are some of the collectibles here in your home.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the items that we're looking at here,
Well,
George?
that white mug there is my service with Stars and Stripes. You see the cross flags over there. That's the logo of the Stars and Stripes, which I worked with in the 50s.
Right.
Those cross cannons there is a relic, a relic of the 440th Anti-Aircraft, which actually trained down close to Laughlin, Nevada, out in the desert. There are many of our anti-aircraft outfits. Actually, that cross cannon and the shell is the code insignia for Coast Artillery. And the anti-aircraft took over that symbol because anti-aircraft was developed initially to protect Coast Artillery forts and so on.
Okay.
That cup there, that cup is called, I call that the B4 cup. That is a prison cup from the county prison farm here in Fresno County, where 4 of us served some time because we were in contempt of court.
I was just going to ask you about that because it's the Fresno 4, and I do want to mention all 4 names here.
Yes, I do.
Okay, George F. Gruner is part of the Fresno 4.
Yeah.
James Bort Jr.
James Bort Jr. was the city editor at the time, and he now is no longer with us.
He passed away a couple of years ago, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, a little more.
A little more than a couple
5,
of years, maybe about 5, yeah. And then William K. Patterson.
William K. Patterson and Joe Rosado were the 2 reporters involved in the B4 case.
Okay, so what happened now? You refused to give up your source. What story was it, and the judge involved was who?
The judge Peckinpah, Denver Peckinpah, was the judge. And what the story involved was the 2 reporters were involved in writing a story, involved testimony before a grand jury about an organization from down Southern California that wanted to take over the garbage franchise in Fresno.
Yeah.
And the grand jury testimony is supposed to be sealed.
Secret.
Secret, yeah. And we came into the information, and the information that we thought was important, but I as the editor in charge of the staff, and the city editor, Jim Bort, as well as the reporters, obviously, the information was that a city councilman testified before the grand jury that he was a lawyer, and he was in the pay of the garbage firm that wanted to take over the franchise. And they had given him a retainer to tout the project, and that they would give him an additional, I think it was about $10,000.
Was this like cash under the table?
Oh, not under the, no, not under the table.
It was all above board, huh?
It was, well, the attorney felt that it was because he was an attorney and he was available to work, and they hired him. But it was not generally known. And we felt that as a city councilman, we held the information for about 2 weeks. We had it, thought about it a lot. And And then the council scheduled a vote on whether this firm was going to get the franchise. And we felt that the citizens were entitled to know that a councilman was in the pay and had been retained by these people.
Mm-hmm.
So we published it.
Yeah.
And the Judge Peckinpah was in charge of the grand jury at the time, and he felt that somebody had leaked grand jury testimony, and he wanted to know who it was. And so he called in the reporters, and ultimately,
you?
and me initially, and then ultimately Jim Bort too, and said, tell me where you got the information. And we were operating under the premise of the Shield Law, which had been passed by the legislature, the Newsman's Shield Law, which said reporters didn't have to reveal their sources. Well, the judge took the position that the judicial branch was not subject to laws passed by the legislature, and therefore he said, tell me what I want to know or you're in contempt of court. So we politely declined under the grounds of the Shield Law and the First Amendment to the Constitution of California and the United States Constitution, that we politely declined to tell him what he wanted to know. So he says, go to jail till you tell me. So that's why we fought it through the state Supreme Court twice, the U.S. Supreme Court twice. We lost in each of those courts. They took the position that he could make us tell it that. So ultimately
how
we
much
went to
time
jail.
in jail?
15 days.
15, okay.
By that time, Peckinpah had retired from the bench, and Judge Holly Best took over the case, which was quite onerous because throughout the country we were getting all kinds of support from the press nationwide.
Yeah, I did some research. I believe Time Magazine
wrote
an article about you guys.
That, Time Magazine, AP put it out on the wires.
Right.
We were getting phone calls from all over the world.
Right.
And
did you eventually give up the source?
No.
You never have, all these
Never
years?
have. And the truth is that I never knew the source.
You still don't know today?
I still don't know.
Now, if you did, you wouldn't tell us, would you?
I would not. No, well, I would not tell you if I knew. But I literally did not know.
Yeah.
And there are some people who surmise they know. They think they know, including my wife, who thinks she knows.
Mm-hmm.
But I said I was never told, and I to this day do not know. But at that time,
but if you
we
didn't
trusted
know,
the reporters' experience enough to say that their source was good. As a result of that, where the McClatchy newspapers, who backed us 100%, and hired lawyers in San Francisco, Washington, Los Angeles, we had lawyers all over the place, including here in Fresno. Phil Fullerton was our primary counsel here in Fresno. And as a result of that, why the company spent hundreds, and I saw some of the bills, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars defending our position. But C.K. McClatchy, who was the president at the time, came to see us and said, now, you guys are basically the ones that are going to have to serve the time if it comes up. We're willing to back you all the way, but you got to basically take the position. So we did, and we went to jail for 15 days, and then Judge Holly Best turned us loose with time served.
We got to take a break, but as it turned out, the source was right, the story was right.
Oh, the story
everything
was accurate,
was correct.
And
100%.
as a result of that, why the firm, the Southern California firm, backed out because they didn't want it to come to vote because they're going to lose.
All right, George F. Gruner is our guest here. Thomas Casagrande, the doctor. 2020 Optometrics is our sponsor today. We thank him for that. We're back with our final remaining moments with George F. Gruner. At 2020 Optometric, your vision is their focus. Whether you're 5 or 65, Dr. Thomas Casagrande will get to know you, your lifestyle, and vision needs to ensure that your contacts or eyeglasses are a perfect fit and the right prescription every time. With the Valley's largest selection of eyewear, 2020 has over 2,000 frames, including top designer brands like Coach, Tiffany, Prada, Ray-Ban, Oakley, and more. Eye exams start as low as $89. So call or stop by to schedule your appointment today. Final remaining moments here with George F. Gruner, the Gruner Awards. Just, you know, well, it's a great honor to you, and it really showcases and focuses and highlights the outstanding journalists that we have today in this Central Valley.
That's true, and
you must be proud.
I'm very proud of the fact that the McClatchy organization chose to put my name on that award, because I've always felt that the McClatchy papers were more concerned about articles in the public interest, and what the awards deal with are examples of public service journalism in the San Joaquin Valley. It's a limited award to pretty much our territory from Sacramento to Bakersfield, and the idea is to have those papers, other papers. It's not something exclusive to McClatchy. It's any paper in the San Joaquin Valley, principally the dailies, that become involved in public service journalism, get a big project, find something wrong going on in their communities, and work on them and develop stories, sometimes to their own detriment, because maybe it involves an advertiser or something of that nature that means that they've got to take them on. And some of the smaller papers have done that through the years, long before this award was developed.
What do you think of what's going on now in the newspaper industry, specifically the Fresno Bee?
Yeah, it's very sad. Generally, the whole
downsizing,
industry,
right?
Downsizing, because advertising has been eliminated largely. It's gone to the social media to a large extent. And it's true also in television to some degree, but not to the extent it is in the print medium. But all the papers across the country are experiencing it. Even the New York Times, which we all hold up as the epitome of print journalism.
That's the bar.
That's the bar to achieve. They are even conducting layoffs. Of course, their layoffs are in the hundreds, and that still leaves them with the thousands of workers. But throughout the country, it's regrettable that the advertisers don't see the value of the print medium as continuing to serve, because the type of journalism that we've long had to do, television primarily. First, radio came along and took a little bit of this, but television came along, and the immediacy of covering events became the primary role of television, whereas newspapers have to go in more for the in-depth coverage, the follow-on, or the stories that television doesn't have the time to do.
Now we're running out of time. Only got a couple of minutes left. Let's roll one more piece of videotape. It's called Books, and the 3 books that you have written are, one of them is the history of the battleship USS California.
Right.
We'll roll that tape, and then another one on the coastal passenger liners, the Yale and the Harvard.
Yeah.
And the final book, Into the Night. And as we look at the videotape of these books, are the journalists of today as good as they were in your day?
I think they are. I think there is every level of journalistic skill today. Maybe they're more skilled today. Actually, I grew up in the hot type era, where it was the old upright telephone. You know, hello, sweetheart, get me rewrite, that kind of thing, where it was a little more slam bang. Where today, I think certainly print journalism, as a requirement to produce a product that has a market to some extent, has to do more in-depth reporting than they did in my early days. So I think we were better, but we're not as good as we were a few years ago.
Yeah, okay. Hey, the book is Into the Night. It's written by George F. Gruner. This one available at the Legion of Valor and also the Veterans Memorial offices over there in Clovis, right? The Veterans Building in Clovis.
Yeah. Also the museum in Clovis.
Okay, the museum in Clovis as well. So get the book and read up on it. George F. Gruner, thank you. Would you come back?
Well, sure. I don't know what we talk about after we've explored this, but
we'll talk about all kinds of things. We'll talk about your career and everything else. But we enjoyed having you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, George F. Gruner, our guest today, special guest, and our thanks to Dr. Thomas Casagrande for sponsoring this program today. Back with another edition of Connect with Me tomorrow on Me TV Fresno.